We got a few things on the agenda to talk about, but before we get started, I want to make sure we've got someone to take notes. Can I get a volunteer to write down some notes in the minutes document? I can share that.
Sure.
In the chat. Great. So I think the first thing we wanted to talk about was Calico at KubeCon. Alex, do you want to lead that?
Sure. So there's a few Calico things going on at KubeCon. The first is on day 0. There's a Calico Con event, which is an all-day kind of training and hands-on workshop, walking people through from some of the basic use cases of Calico. Getting it installed, first network policies, all the way through to some of the more advanced use cases for Calico. So that will be happening. I believe we're expecting around 100 participants at the minute, but there's still space if anybody else wants to join. And you can do that by going through the CNCF registration site, and there's a link at the bottom that will say that if you're already registered for KubeCon, there's a link you can click on where you can go through and select or reselect your day 0 events. So that's going on. We also have a short informal Calico social on that Monday evening in San Diego at a bar, Union Bar and Tap, which is pretty close to the conference center. So there'll be a bunch of Calico maintainers and contributors and users just getting together there to kind of have a casual catch up over a beer and connect and put faces to names. So come join us if you're around for that. There's no registration or anything. We're just turning up at the bar. And final thing is Tigera will have a booth there as well. So there'll be a bunch of Calico folks probably gravitating around that during the conference. Plus, I'm sure there'll be the usual number of people talking about Calico in their conference talks. So that's where we go for that.
Cool. Yeah, I was just saying, I keep forgetting that KubeCon's coming up next week. It came up real fast.
It is real fast, and then it'll be next year. You'll blink.
Yeah, I know. I think it's been doing the doubling thing every year so far, so I'm excited to see how many people show up. I always tend to run into the same folks anyway, though.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was just a quick check-in on the 3.10 release. So we did a 3.10.1 patch release, which just had a few minor bug fixes in it. So the first was a fix to our Docker files to make sure that we're actually always using the latest components, software components. So we weren't pulling in a number of CVE fixes that we should have been in our Docker build process. So that's been backported and released. I think we went from like 4 or 5 fixable CVEs to none after that change, which is great. And then the other thing that went in there was a very fun little fix. It came in from an external contributor called Beauty Tiger, which fixes an issue with IPAM block releasing. I wanted to call this one out because I thought it was a very, I don't know, it was a curious little change that I'm surprised was spotted. So I wanted to give credit to Beauty Tiger for that. We were using the wrong strings package function to detect whether or not a block belonged to a host. And 99% of the time it probably worked, but depending on your host name, I think it would behave slightly differently.
It was a pretty neat kind of one-line fix where at first glance you go like, why are they changing that? And then you look deeper and you're like, oh yeah, good spot.
Yeah, it's I still want to look at it a little bit more. There was one related issue, I think Cube Controllers issue 412 that I thought this would fix, but the Razor is reporting that they're still seeing it. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding that one properly. So both of those were in 3.10.1, which went out last week. We're looking at a 3.10.2 patch as well coming up. I'm guessing probably end of next week at this point. There are a few things that we're looking to get into that. So the first is the Calico issue number 2889, which is a problem with our liveness reporting. Brad, I think that's actually one you raised. So glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for getting that in.
Yeah, so I think we understand what we need to do for that now, and we'll get that into a patch. The other one that we're looking at, Lawrence Mann is working on some base image updates to use UBI. So those will probably be going into 10.2 as well. Given it's still a week out, there's still opportunity for us to pull in some other fixes if they're already in progress. So if anybody knows about those.
I think there's one other that might be worth mentioning. So we found an IPv6 issue, which manifested in our OpenStack rig testing. I mean, I understand that OpenStack is not a central focus, but we have supported IPv6 with Calico for OpenStack for some time. And that stopped working a while back, and it turned out to be something really obscure about the routes, maintaining the routes that we kind of set up on the host side of Calico interfaces. So basically, we had some code which was accidentally removing the link local address route, which prevented IPv6 function from working. So that'll be in the next patch release as well, I assume. And I think that probably will be relevant. So if we hadn't fixed that, I think that would have caused us problems when we come to doing more IPv6 work for Kubernetes as well. So, and we've had that. That's a regression which was actually in 3.9 and 3.10. So I'm afraid we didn't spot that for a while, but we have happily spotted it now.
Yeah, thanks for calling that one out. Do you know if that's been backported yet to the release branches?
Yeah, that is backported to 3.9 and 3.10 release branches. So as soon as those get released, that'll be in there.
Cool. Yeah, so that'll come in the 3.10 as well.
Who's it? Turk, are you taking the notes? Do you want to share the document in as well so people can see as you're typing? And then anybody else on the call, feel free to chip into that document and add additional notes.
Are you talking about the notes document? I think it's in the comments in this chat already.
Yeah, no, I'm saying share it in so that people can see.
Oh, share my whole screen.
Yeah, or if you can't just share that window, then I can share it.
No, I can do that. Yeah, sorry, I just didn't understand what you meant.
Yeah, just it can just be helpful for people tracking along. Awesome, thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Dirk.
I also had a question. What's the UBI images? What is that?
Yes. So UBI is it stands for Universal Base Image. It's basically I think based off of RHEL. It's the kind of like Red Hat maintained, supposedly pretty frequently released CVE patches for. So we're hoping that it, one, reduces the frequency that we have to do special stuff for CVEs, but it's also part of an effort to get Calico images in the Red Hat container registry, which is part of integration with the OpenShift 4.2 and onwards project.
Cool, thanks.
So I think next we wanted to talk about 3.11, which is on the horizon now. Eric, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. So as far as the timeline for it, we're hoping for mid-December, I believe, is what we're going to shoot for. The main feature being dual stack support. So right now, or previously Kubernetes has only supported IPv4 or 6, which we have supported. But now they have the ability to support both. So we need to integrate those changes and test them out. So that is the main feature, and we'll probably pick up some other bugs and stuff along the way too, but I don't know what those are yet. But yeah, it's mainly dual stack.
Nice, that's exciting. I think that most of that work will probably be on the testing side and getting install paths that are reliable for it.
Yeah.
There's probably a little bit of work. So that they added some new API fields for multiple addresses and things like that, which we'll need to add some code for, but I think that'll be relatively minor.
Yeah, I agree with that testing.
Yeah, I heard there's some users who got the basic dual stack working, but still really only doing one stack using it. So I think until we add those little extra APIs in,
yeah, we've had like kind of pseudo dual stack support for a while because our IPAM plugin can assign both types of addresses like at the same time. But
just not with these official new APIs. The APIs are in alpha or in beta?
Well, it's a little weird because the API itself is on a V1 resource. It's on the pod resource, but dual stack support itself is alpha at this point.
Yeah, they've changed it, so instead of the pod having a pod IP, it has a pod IPs field which has a list of IPs, and it also has the pod IP field which has to be set to the first value in the list. So if you're only looking at the pod IP field, then you kind of still work, but we need to look at the pod IPs field and make sure we deal with that correctly.
Cool.
Yeah, we actually we spotted an interesting interaction between those as well, because if you're writing to that API, I think you need to understand both now. We tried to, I think it was in one of our tests, I was looking at it with Raphael a while back, we tried to write to one, but if we didn't write to both correctly, it canceled out our changes, which now that I think about it might be a bug in the way Kubernetes is handling that. But
Also got our annotation where we put the IP as well as a sort of backup for when things are taking a while to go through the system.
Yeah, that's a good point. There'll be a few different touch points we'll have to look at. So I wanted to leave some time here to call out some of the more hot issues, the more active issues that I think we should be discussing or looking at. So I have one that I'd like to talk about, but others can feel free to chime in as well. So one issue that's kind of hot on my mind right now is Calico issue 2713. So that's an issue where a number of users are seeing that Calico IPAM blocks are not released. And this is kind of a tricky one because, well, first of all, there are, by my reading, a number of different root causes that people are seeing in that issue, but they manifest pretty similarly. I think we have fixed a few of them. So there was one where we weren't properly releasing the IP or VXLAN tunnel address when a node was deleted, which would result in leaked IP blocks. We have fixed that, and it's gone into a few patch releases. But there's also appears to be a legitimate case where like actual workload addresses are leaked. So I looked at this a whole bunch a little while back. I brought up a bunch of clusters in different ways and tried churning them and just generally trying to break them through various techniques, and had pretty much no luck getting into this state. So I think this is more a call for I don't know, mobilizing others who might have ideas for how to hit this or have hit this and might have some diags. From what I've seen so far, I haven't been able to figure out a root cause.
Obviously, there's the release bug you mentioned earlier. Is that you think there's more underlying cause than that? I guess.
Yeah, I think there is. So the release bug that I mentioned earlier is a good one and would result in IP blocks not being released. But I think that what we're seeing here is actual IP addresses not being released within blocks. So we wouldn't actually get to that bug that I mentioned earlier because we're hitting something else first.
Yeah, right, got it.
Does Kate's just not kind of tell us if, say, a whole node goes away and like the pods on that node? Do we handle that case?
We do handle that case if a node goes away, but because our model supports this IPAM borrowing thing, we don't just like throw away the block when that happens, because there might be addresses borrowed from other nodes. And right now we don't have code in place that will be able to detect when an address is borrowed or not at the time that that node is deleted. So yeah, one thing we could do is like an enhancement to kube controllers that can do this sort of backstop garbage collection and catch these things when they get leaked. I think that's probably a pretty good thing to do in general, just as a, fail-safe. But it's not the root cause here. I think the code that we have for the highway path is working the way it's supposed to. It's just that we're not getting to that highway. You see what I mean?
All right. Good. I had one. There's a Typha rebalancing issue. I think it's mainly just because we added in not too long ago where our conf-d, in addition to Felix, are using Typha, but when we added conf-d to that, we forgot to update the way we calculate how many clients a Typha should support. So in a decent enough sized cluster, you'll get Typhas continually kicking clients because they think there are too many connected. It actually, I think, is a pretty straightforward fix. I've looked at the code where it needs to be updated. I probably should have just submitted a PR, but this would probably be a great one for somebody getting into things. It should be a simple, straightforward fix. I think it's just changing how we calculate, basically doubling the number of connections that our Typha is expected to connect to allow, I guess. Yeah, just thought I'd mention that. Any questions?
I had a comment just because I remember this issue and remember liking it because I thought it was a testament to Sean's forethought that we were hitting this, but actually the cluster was working fine. It just shows up in a couple logs. So obviously something we should fix, but I like that it's actually resilient enough to carry on.
Yeah. The way the reporter, the only reason they noticed is because they were looking through the logs and saw it happening.
I think the reporter actually suggested oh, you shouldn't do this. You should just have a maximum time that you allow a connection to be, and then just dump it once every few hours so that you recycle. It's that's kind of the behavior that we degrade to. So, yeah, he was kind of getting what he wanted already.
Okay, so I've got an issue as well. This sadly is one that does not, it's not resilient. It does not kind of automatically fix itself. I'm sorry to say. This is to do with the feature we've recently added to do with Calico being able to advertise service IPs, service cluster IPs over BGP. And it's a really funny one because this is issue number 2457 in case anyone's following along in GitHub. And basically this is one of those thing where most of the time this new feature works just fine, but every now and then someone's trying to advertise their service IPs and they discover that everything has just stopped working. They're not advertising anything. They actually lose connectivity in their cluster or from a particular node. And the smoking gun symptom is that they see black hole routes to service IPs in their Linux IP routing table. And this is an issue. We're not looking for help really, just kind of calling this out because we think we know what this is about now. Basically, it's a race where basically the generation of the underlying bird config here depends upon several inputs flowing through the system. And it just turns out that if you get these inputs in a slightly different order through the system, you can transition through a state where the bird config generates these black hole routes. But unfortunately, as soon as it does that, that by itself cuts off your connectivity from the data store, which means that you then don't see the following updates which would correct the problem. So once you get into that situation, it sticks. And we think we know what the fix is. It's a pretty simple update to templating, the bird config templating. So anyway, if you if you've been seeing that yourself, that's what that's about. And hopefully we'll get a fix for that in time for 3.11 as well.
And Neil,
Awesome.
it doesn't have anything to do with /32 and /128 black holes, does it? I'm asking because a PR came in this morning.
I mean, any kind of black hole. I mean, the thing is, it could be to a 32 or a 128, because the thing with this service reversement feature is that what we'll do is that we'll generally advertise the whole of the service CIDR range as a /24 or a /2616 or whatever it's configured as in your cluster. But if you have services which have external traffic policy set to local on them, then what we do for those is that we advertise the full service IP only from the nodes that actually have a backend for that service on. And so in that case, you'll see you'll see kind of /32 or /128 routes going around your cluster. And I haven't checked every detail, but I guess that this bug probably applies equally to both of those cases. So therefore you could see black holes for those /32s as well as for the whole range.
Okay, this PR won't help then, probably.
So hopefully it will help. And yeah, if you want to put a link, kind of a suggested link between those, that'll be great.
Awesome. So that one, it sounds like Calico maintainers are on top of.
Yeah.
The previous two, so the Taifa rebalancing, this is a thing that some areas, this would be a great issue for external contributor.
I think so. I think it was. I'm not super familiar with Taifa and Felix, but I took a look at it and it seemed reasonable enough, simple enough. So.
And then the first one that I signed blocks is looking for additional DAGs from the community. So that's interesting. I'm trying to think. Like Brad, you guys run quite a lot of Calico clusters. Have you bumped up against this one?
Yeah, we did see the IPAM one specifically. We had a cluster that had used up pretty much all of its /16. So we sent in the etcd. It might have been the ones Casey said he looked at. We sent in the etcd backup from like a week ago and from 2 weeks before we hit it. But the cluster had already also been around for, I think, about 2 years. So been upgraded through many releases. So it could have been a slow, right? Something slow that had come up. So.
Yeah, it's an area that, like, I think especially in the early days of V3, like in 3.2, 3.3, we put in a lot of fixes in this area.
And it was also one of those I discovered while we were looking at something else. So it wasn't, I don't think it was even the cause of the problem we were having. It was causing Bird to have to work overtime. But so yeah, it could have been around for many months before we noticed it as well. So.
All right.
Trouble with those issues is they can even be like something that's caused by an earlier release. We fixed the bug, but it's left something in the data store that then it's a bug that keeps giving.
bug that keeps giving. Yeah. So maybe that idea of doing a kind of defensive garbage collection in addition to trying to get to the bottom of what the race condition is here would be a good approach.
Yeah, I think so.
And I guess as far as the other one, we don't use KDD yet, so we're not using Taifa.
Turk, I saw you put a label on that Taifa one. There's we recently added a good first issue, I think it's called. That's probably, yeah, there's the one. Thank you very much. Any other issues folks wanted to bring up bring to attention? No. If not, then let's move on to our very first Calico Heroes section. So I wanted to kind of leave this open just for people to shout out folks that deserve some recognition, who have done something awesome for the Calico community. I have someone in mind, so I'll start it off. I wanted to shout out to Jack Kleeman, who submitted a PR to fix something that I've wanted to do for, I don't even know, probably like over 2 years at this point. So libcalico go PR 1135 optimized some of the ways that we build rules based on Kubernetes network policies. So when we first did this, we kind of took the simple approach and built a rule for every port that was in the network policy rule. And Jack optimized that and kind of reduced the number of rules that are required when using a Kubernetes network policy, which will ultimately result in fewer rules in the data plane itself. So I was super excited to see that PR when he raised it. Plus, it kind of just worked. I reviewed it and had no comments and just merged it, which was also awesome.
That's impressive to get past you and with no comments. I wanted to shout out to Jay. Jay, thanks for keeping us honest on those local builds and fixing those up. And agreeing to be our first demo here, too.
Here,
Thank
here.
you.
You've been very helpful. Everybody's been really helpful, so I appreciate all the help. Especially very welcoming community here. I'm not a networking, I've done very little networking, low-level stuff in my life. Come from the kind of distributed systems-y, kind of big data, Kubernetes upstream world, but haven't focused on the networking. And so I've learned a lot from everybody here, and so I'm having a blast. So I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, any time you think we could improve on something, please let us know too. I mean, in helping you out or whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll do a quick shout out to Valentin Uvra, I think is his surname, based over in Europe, who continues to do good things with Calico IPv6 and educating the community there with like conference talks and meetups, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't been pinging us for dual stack support. Seems like he would be on the forefront of that, but maybe he's just completely abandoned before, so he doesn't worry about it. But yeah, he has done some good stuff.
Yeah, it's probably because he's had dual stack working for 2 years now or something like that.
Yeah, he's wondering what everybody else's problem is.
Yeah, I think he's been doing it for a couple of years, and without the Kubernetes API stuff.
I've got one more too, actually. Wanted to shout out to Tom Pointon, who picked up one of the main features in the last Calico release. So he took the external IP advertisement stuff from start to finish, and kind of drove that to completion. So yeah, really excited about that feature. And I know a bunch of other people are as well.
Nice. Any more for any more?
In that case, let's move on to the demo. Jay?
Oh, okay. Let me share here. Let's see. Okay. Desktop. Okay, here we go. There we go. That should be it. All right. Everybody sees my desktop?
It's a little bit small for me. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, it's kind of high. Yeah, I got a fancy monitor. You know, now I'm working at a big, I'm not at a startup anymore. I'm at a big company where we get big monitors. So, okay, is that better?
It's better.
Okay.
I don't know, I can read that if I get close.
It kind of depends what bit of it you want us to read.
I'm just, is the big part readable where it says like my name? That's a good start. And then I'll switch to the terminal.
Yeah, the website's okay.
Okay.
Anything in the editor behind it, we'd struggle with.
Oh yeah. I'll just resize everything. So, okay, cool. So I'll move this. I'll move that to the top, and let me know if anybody can't see anything at any time because I'm on a weird monitor here. So yeah, this is not like some super advanced technology that I'm showing you today, right? This is how to get things done and ship Calico as a production artifact. So I hope it doesn't bore anybody. So like, if there's build stuff that we should like talk about throughout this, just interrupt me. Let's consider this interactive. I'm doing some things in here that Casey told me not to do. So Casey, tell me why I'm crazy before I give this to customers. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, if anybody's new here, you know, you don't have to do this. You know, I have to do it. You don't have to. The Docker images are out there. There's a CI. You know, we have a nice little CI. You can go and you can see that right at any time. You can see all the builds and everything. So it's not really, you don't really need that. I mean, you don't need to test everything yourself and everything. So why build it? Obviously, you may want to change things. To me, the reason I'm really building it, you know, obviously there's things aren't even worth mentioning. You want to reproduce a bug or something. We may want to backport CVE fixes. So I'm Jay. I work at VMware on the cloud native upstream team, and you know, so one of our things that we want to do is really give Calico to customers and have some control over how frequently we build it, when we patch it, if something's wrong, you know, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of part of why you may want to build it. But I guess for most developers, it's just a matter of reproducing a bug, right? Like Casey was talking about earlier, it's hard to reproduce things. So, you know, again, this is all introductory stuff. I don't think anybody here doesn't already know that this is what it looks like when you're running this Calico as your CNI. So it starts to sort of get interesting here. Here are the release repositories, right? And please do interrupt me if I'm missing anything here, but roughly everything depends on libcalico. Node depends on Felix and libcalico. You know, so that's kind of at the core of everything, and I'll get into why that's kind of important.
Felix also depends on Typha.
Felix also depends on Typha. Okay, so I'm missing one here.
Because the Typha client lives in the Typha repo.
Yeah, I did think I saw that. So, you know, I just kind of reverse engineered this by grepping for stuff inside of vendor directories and stuff. Like so yeah, looks like I thought I did catch that at some point. So we've had, so when we.
Have you got the conf in there somewhere as well?
No, yeah, I actually do not have conf.
So you definitely need conf in there somehow. That's and that depends on libcalico and Typha as well, I think.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's an input for Node. So
Oh, wait, we add Typha. You mean Typha depends on conf D?
no, the other way around, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait.
We have our own fork of confd that speaks our data model as its backend. It's
I
quite
got
a long way from the original confd, but we still use all the
Still call
templating logic and stuff.
Okay, so we've kind of
quite a heavy fork at this point.
yeah, it's a Calico specific. Okay, cool. I had no idea, so this is great. So anyways, the first thing I did when I started hacking on this stuff was became very obvious that we needed a reproducible way to build it, and so I kind of brainstormed some with Casey about like what would be simple, and it turned out the first thing I found out is that nobody developed on OS 10. I guess everybody over there, you're all Debian people. So I was like, okay, the first thing we need to do is get rid of all this Mac related stuff because nobody's using it. Or let's just not pretend that we build on multiple operating systems. So as soon as you do that for OS 10 people, you need a way to spin up a Linux development environment. Now, I think you could also do this with Docker, but Docker and Docker and Docker and Docker and Docker always can get confusing at times, especially if you're doing sophisticated networking stuff. So I thought for a conservative starting point, a vagrant recipe would be a good start. So what this does just goes and you just cd to hack. And I'm actually running this. I'm running a fork of the upstream, which is
I think we need a bit bigger.
Okay, yeah, let's make it big. So, okay. Yeah. So I'm running a fork of upstream Calico, okay? And so in my fork, what I do is I actually have submodules for everything in the 310 branch, okay? So in everything in the 310 branch, what I'm doing here is I I run the regular what's in upstream, which is here, okay? And we have a vagrant file, and you can see it's running in the bottom right now, so it's creating creating a VirtualBox VM and whatever, and just creates a single node, and it runs this install.sh script. And this install.sh script literally just, it puts kubeadm on there. I do have another example that's using kind now that I'll show towards the end of this that I've actually taken from a blog post mostly. But it goes ahead and it kicks off a build. I mean, this is all really simple stuff, right? Kicks off a build. The tag command is important here because if you're not in a Git repository, I think that'll break, or there's other reasons it can break if you don't have this tag command. It does this local build here, which tells it, you're building locally. And so what that leads to is replacing of the submodules dynamically. And that's an important thing to understand when you're building Calico, is that those submodules get like rewritten when you do this to point to what's in .. So the directory structure for whenever you're building Calico is that you have Calico at you have all the repositories at the same level, and Calico goes up .. down to node. Calico goes down to Typha. So Calico is the builder for all of Calico, right? And it has to go into each one of those repositories as siblings. Then it has a little smoke test, literally just goes in and makes sure that all the Docker images were built properly, greps out that the latest tag was built for them. So right now, as you can see, it's running. It's again, there's nothing here. It's just literally the source code. So it's created a VM, it's bootstrapped it with Docker and everything else, and now it's pulling down everything it needs to build. And then it installs Calico. So as you know, Calico has an underscore output where it has the manifests, right? And so after that, it just kubectl applies them and then just prints out what pods are in the system. Obviously, that's not enough. You have to wait a little while. So we just have a little loop here, and we wait for the various Calico containers, the CNI containers, to come up and running. And at the end, it just prints out pass or fail. So you can have your own little kind of local CI where you can hack a change something, go get coffee, vagrant destroy vagrant up, and pretty much be guaranteed that you have a pure build that works or not. So this is like a very, very primitive beginning to a completely reproducible like build system. Of course, so the first thing so now back to the stuff here. You know, so I did mention this submodule thing, right? So what I do is I actually have submodule that points to Calico, and then inside of Calico, inside of the hack directory, I then have my own like little VMware directory where I have actually created all these submodules inside of here, and I've modified what we do in upstream to mount. Let's see, where do I do it? Calico. Yeah. See oh, it's actually in the vagrant file, right? So I guess the important thing to note here is that if you have a different directory structure for your Calico and you want to use these recipes, all you have to do is change the sync folders, right? So in upstream, you know, we just put everything in, I think, Calico all / but in the way I do it here is I mount Calico, I mount .. VMware into Calico, and then I mount .. which is where my Calico lives, into Calico all / Calico, right? So that's how I reproduce that sibling directory structure. So really, without actually having to change the upstream development recipes, you can just change this vagrant file, and you can make your own on-prem build and release tooling for Calico if you're releasing your own Calico containers. So I actually do use this. It's very helpful to me at my day job because I have all these different, you know, I have, you know, all these different submodules, and I want to make sure everything compiles and releases before I put it up to our, you know, sort of our big corporate build system, right? So I would love if other people wanted to adopt using the same thing somehow, and you know, I'd happy to help or collaborate on it, even a different way of doing this, because I'm sure what I'm doing is quite suboptimal. For example, maybe we could just do all this in Docker using Docker and Docker, I thought. I did mention the local build thing. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that go mod edits stuff in the build. You may have noticed this. So I had to learn a little bit about this. So the go mod edit thing happens here. And as you can see, what it's doing is these definitions from the internet. And Casey helped explain this to me the other day. These definitions from the internet, you know, get remapped to these .. So I think there's a couple of tiny issues. We worked with Raphael to fix them. They're really just small issues, like, for example, making sure that we did these replaces at the right time in the build after the right environment variables were declared and stuff. And so that's it. So yeah, if you want to get started and build Calico from source, this is pretty much all you have to do. You can just copy paste this, you know, git clone everything, cd to hack development environment, run vagrant up, and you'll have Calico running from source on a locally built Kubernetes cluster. So what I kind of want to do though is move this over to Kind. So those, you probably all are familiar what Kind is. Does everybody know what that is? Kubernetes in Docker, right? So you know, there was a recent blog post that actually came out from actually one of my colleagues here at VMware on how to run Calico in Kubernetes, and so other people have run it as well. But roughly, the only, you know, secret sauce in there that wasn't too obvious was how to do this daemon set thing for Calico node, where you set the Felix environment variable here. But roughly, if you do this, I'm working on this on a different machine right now, and something's broken in the makefile. I'm doing it on Ubuntu. I'm not sure what, but it's on my end because I'm working from a fork. But once I get this working, I'd like to kind of maybe explore whether this is maybe a better way of doing all this.
I think our test frameworks in that repo already use Kind, or one of the flavors of running Kubernetes in Docker.
Yeah. That's cool.
I think
Do
we've
we use
got
it for building too? Do we just build? I mean, I know we build in Docker, but are we capable of building Docker in Docker? Has anyone tried that?
I haven't done a build in Docker. The node tests, functional tests, like pre-commit, do run I think it's called KubeADM Docker in Docker, which, if I recall correctly, was one of the predecessors to Kind.
The kind, yeah.
I think the Kind project evolved out of that one.
Yeah, we have been doing some work with Kind for our kind of private, our enterprise products. So recently, and my personal experience is that it's a lot easier and quicker to get stuff done with than the Docker in Docker. The Kube Din cluster was. Kind seems to be really, really nice and easy to bring up very quickly. So this is is an approach I'd recommend for any kind of cluster deployment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I'm definitely going to do is move, just move the K8 setup over to Kind. I don't really see why. I just did KubeADM because I was kind of in a hurry to get something up and working. But and I wanted it to be as easy to debug as possible. But I think now that we're to the point where we know it all works, I think moving to something that's kind of a little fancier would be kind of nice. I'm still wondering though whether development tooling and stuff, having an actual VM is still valuable for anything. And I still haven't really thought much about that.
I think if you run, maybe it's okay if you run like Kind on a Mac and then you run Calico inside it. That might be okay because won't you be running like a mini VM per node anyway? So is that how that works?
I think it's a Docker container per node.
Yeah, but if you're running on Mac OS,
okay.
I think that's a single VM that it spins up that all the Docker containers run on, if I recall.
But it has a fighting chance of working because it will really be running on a Linux VM. So our code doing its networking thing will be running inside that VM rather than running on the OS 10 host, which is obviously not going to work because
I mean, definitely everything's happening virtualized for sure, right? So my thought was like is there something weird with if I change a file and I want to sync that file before I rebuild from source? Do I run into slowness when I'm mounting Docker over Docker or stuff like that? Like it was like the little weird things like that. Like I know how our sync works, all that Docker magic story plumbed from my laptop into a VM, into a container, into another container that's inside of that container. Like I don't know when things get slow and weird, when you're compiling hundreds and thousands of files. That's the thing I was kind of more. But again, I just, it's those little things like that. Like, if you wanted to have autocomplete working in your IDE and make those little things that I was kind of.
I just wanted to. I mean, I personally am a lover of the native Linux laptop. So
exactly, yeah, exactly, and that's the closest.
I'd recommend it, but
exactly, and this is the closest thing to that, right? It literally spins up a machine that, in my imagination, is what Casey sits in front of every day, right? Like.
But I just wanted to mention one other thing as well, because just in case you weren't aware of this, so you talked about compiling lots and lots, and we looked earlier about having skip conft, and I just wanted to mention that if you're building something like a Calico node, you don't have to build the individual components of that first. So you don't have to kind of build Felix and conft and libcalico and everything first and then build Calico node, because when you build a Calico node, it has pins in it and it pulls in the kind of the code level that it needs of all of those other repositories. And it will, so just a build in the node repo will build all of that for you. So I mean, it can be very useful to build all of the other repos individually, because that then allows you to do lots of other things, like running kind of the more focused testing that we have in each of those repos, kind of the more FE testing and unit testing that we have for each of those particular components, which is really useful. But you don't necessarily need to do that to build the bits you end up deploying in a cluster.
Yeah.
In a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, you could just build one thing at a time if you need to. Yeah. Yeah, so I've done that. I did that for, what was it, Felix, I think, something else kind of hacking on for Felix. Where I just, actually the way I used this was spin up the VM and then I use Vagrant SSH to SSH into it. And then I changed the files for Felix or whatever and would run make on and off and,
Yeah.
build that way. Yeah, that works as well.
Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt just quickly because we've only got 4 minutes left. I wanted to give a time check and make sure we had time to wrap up. So thanks very much for showing this and being our first demo. I'm pretty excited about this and the future with Kind. I've got a bit of a vision myself that we start incorporating Kind into our actual test framework across all these repos. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that work.
Okay, cool. And that's pretty much it. So we got to the close to the end. It's probably going to start polling now, but it hasn't finished yet. But I think that's good enough. You guys can all see how this works, and feel free to test it and let me know if you like it or if there's something I can change.
Very cool
stuff. Yeah, nice.
So on the agenda, we had some time set aside for Q&A. We've only got 3 minutes left, so we have some time for Q&A if there is any, or further discussion on the demo if not. Or any other last minute topics people wanted to bring up.
When's the next community meeting scheduled for?
Great question. I think we are planning on doing this monthly. So
Did you say second Wednesday of each month, was it?
Yeah, it's like Wednesday, 11th of December, I think.
yeah.
So I had a question. This is less aimed at the maintainers, but just the group as a whole, as to what they would like to see covered in these meetings. Was the kind of blend today pretty good, or would anybody like us to change that balance? What about Brad? How was it for you? Like you, I mean, your team are Calico experts, really. What would you like to see in these meetings?
I mean, we're not maintainers, unfortunately. Our other jobs have prevented that up till now. This was really useful for me, especially the overview of kind of the hot bugs or the important things that have been found. So yeah, this was great. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Any more for any more?
All right. In that case, thanks.
Who's going to be at KubeCon?
I am.
I'll be out there.
Me, Casey, and Jay. Then we're the lucky ones, or the unlucky ones, depending on how you look at it.
I think we're lucky.
It's in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're lucky.
I might sign up for the Calico thing. Actually, I think I'm there Monday. I'm out there with my kids, so like my schedule's gonna be weird, but I'll try to hang out when you do the community thing. I'll try to come by.
Nice.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again in a month and on the Slack and GitHubs, I guess. See y'all.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye, everybody.